Welcome to the Ephesiology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the study of the early Christian movement and its implications for the church today. Today, we're with Michael, our resident ephesiologist, Andrew Johnston, associate pastor at Neartown Church in Houston, Texas. I am Matt Till, and we have a special guest, a dear friend of mine, and my worlds are, in fact, colliding. We have the president of Knox Theological Seminary with us today, my friend and colleague, Dr. Scott Maynor. Scott, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
We are really glad to have you on the podcast. We talked about you last week, so I hope you didn't listen. They were all terrible things.
Set expectations low. That's my goal. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, just only kidding. We did tease it out though that we were going to have you on, and just for our audience sake, I work with Scott, and grateful to be working on the team at Knox as their director of communications, and also just kind of working to advance their mission as well. And Scott, we're glad to have you on the podcast today because we are in a series in which we're talking about theological education, its importance, and really what is Knox doing in this space, but also some of the things at which we see that are taking place, really, here in the West, but also globally as well as it comes to theological education. We're going to solve all the problems here actually today, right now. So I hope everyone's ready for that.
I would say take your notes. In 45 minutes, we'll solve all the world's problems.
Oh man, only if we could.
Michael, how about you just kind of give us a bit of a kind of lay the groundwork here a little bit for us, and why this is an important topic, why we're coming back to this again, and why we're doing this series.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of our passions, isn't it? Theological education. I mean, and we've been about this. We've been talking about it off and on over the past 3 years, how important it is for us to equip people for works of ministry and to do that effectively. And we're recognizing the need, not just in the context of the North America, but around the world. The World Evangelical Alliance estimates that there are 50,000 people that are baptized every day. And if you just think about that, the magnitude, the scale of the numbers of people that are becoming followers of Christ, and you think about the need of those folks being shepherded and led and equipped, we're talking about the need of quite a number of pastors to be theologically prepared every day to lead those new believers. And so the task is quite daunting. And then, when we talk about the North American context, and we referenced this, I think we did last week, but the Pine Tops Foundation study that was done in 2017, 2018, is indicating that we need to be doubling and tripling our church planting rate to be around or between 8,000 to 11,000 churches annually. That's conventionally, we've been understanding that our rate of church planting is about 4,000 a year. And now we're seeing more churches actually close than churches that are starting. And to think that we need to double and triple that is it's humanly impossible to do it in the systems that we have. And so we need to really be thinking outside the box about how we can equip people and to see more church planters actually in the harvest, planting churches, doing evangelism and discipleship, not just starting churches, but doing evangelism and discipleship and those leading to new congregations. And so that's our concern. We want to be able to be in a position and serve the church to properly equip more church planters.
And that really leads us into, Scott, I know what your passion is, and your passion through the seminary is to educate men and women to declare and demonstrate the gospel of Jesus Christ. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and your heart for the seminary and kind of in the context of your role?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me this morning. This is great. Certainly, I've gotten to know ephesiology a little bit, the heart behind it. Michael, you and I have had some conversations. Matt, for my sins, I have to talk with him a lot. And, that's actually a real pleasure.
Is he Father Matt now? Or are we going that route?
Wait,
No,
do you have a confessional there behind that bookcase, Matt, or what?
No, Matt's a gift, as you well know. And so I think there's a shared heart here. And, I'm a member of a church plant here in South Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. So I understand from the congregant side of things, what it's like to be part of a small church that's trying to reach a community that's otherwise relatively untouched in many ways. And so, yeah, there's a lot of shared heart, a shared desire, I think, between myself personally and then Knox and Ephesiology. We're, working on a partnership together. That's all great. I think from Knox's end, Matt's already hit at the core of our mission statement, which is our mission is to educate men and women to declare and demonstrate the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think within that, you can actually frame out a number of things that are unique to Knox. It gives a broad category for us to be able to say what we're about. What you don't hear us saying is we want to train a bunch of super conservative Reformed pastors of mega churches, or we only want to train people in North America. We see, as I think you guys would share this commitment, that the value of theological education in part is, yes, to equip Christian leaders that will go on and serve as pastors, and Knox equips those. We have a graduation coming up a week from Friday. Friday the 13th. What better day to have a seminary graduation?
I bet everything's going to go great.
Than that, nothing's going to go wrong. And but if you look at our graduates, those that are going to be walking across the stage and receiving their diplomas, their call is in all sorts of different areas. So they're going to be pastors, but there's also teachers. We've got plumbers and lawyers. I've got a guy who owns a pest control company. And these are all graduates of Knox. And say, what are they doing in seminary? Well, they're acting on the call that God has given them, that we see in Ephesians 4:11 and following, that God has called pastors, prophets, evangelists, and others to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. And so, for anyone listening, it's not those that are sort of on the field doing the work of ministry and those sitting in the stands watching it happen. We're all called to do ministry. And I would say that Knox recognizes that call. We affirm that call, and we want to equip people for that call, regardless of what it is that God has called you to be professionally. Perhaps that's a pastor, but perhaps it's something else. And so, I do think that as we talk about the church and some of the crisis that it's facing and a bunch of turbulence, you get the pandemic and people are asking, pastors are asking, what do I do? I think part of, at the core of Knox is really equipping and sending a strong laity to be able to be effective ministers of God's word in the communities that he's put them in.
Wow, I love that. And that's really what it's going to take, isn't it? I mean, and we've talked about this as well. We've been looking at some of the ATS statistics over the past year in terms of the numbers of people that are enrolling in degree programs, and so exciting to see that MA degrees increasing. And that's what you're talking about. I mean, you have your ordinary person in the pew that is sensing a desire to be more prepared, better prepared to engage in their context.
Yeah, that's right. And, the MA is interesting. I could spend all day talking about ATS and data, so you'll have to shut me up. But the ATS data is very interesting, especially when you can parse that in a number of ways to actually tell a couple different stories. Bottom line, you're right that the interest in the MA is increasing. The interest in the MDiv is certainly decreasing. And with that comes a lot of challenges for seminaries as they think through what do we do, especially when our flagship degree for a lot of schools has been the MDiv. And so there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, just to kind of affirm your point, it's worth looking at the reports that ATS is sending out, but also asking some good questions about them too.
Well, one of the realities that we're trying to confront is the numbers, the sheer numbers of people that we need to see properly equipped to engage in evangelism, discipleship, and church planting in North America. I'm hoping we'll have Craig Whitney on from Stadia here in a couple of weeks to help us think through that. But in a recent conversation that he and I had, he said in their experience, it takes 10 prospective church planters just to get one church started. And if we do the math then, and if Pine Top's foundation is correct, that we need to be starting between 8,000 and 11,000 churches, that seems to indicate we need to have a pool of 80,000 or more prospective church planters. Then when we compare that then with what our traditional preparation has been in terms of seminary, and ATS schools only graduating not quite 17,000 just last year, there's a huge gap there. And so part of the reason, of course, that Scott, we have you on is to help us figure out how do we address that gap?
Well, yeah, I'll see what I can do, but to go back Scott, to my earlier,
I want to jump on and agree with you, and I my heart beats happily and proudly at hearing you declare the people who are walking across our stage, the people who ATS are going to count as, towards that 16,000, right? That towards that 17,000. They aren't all walking out to go and be lead church planters. They are going out to continue to be faithful and lead well as pest control owners, as electricians, as plumbers, as people who are out in this world. And to accomplish the task that God has given us, we are going to need church planters, but it is going to necessarily force us to change our definition of what does it take to be a church planter. And it is going to force our hand to change what does it mean to be a church plant, right? We already joked, we are only going to take the highly reformed conservative mega church planter who will only do so in the suburbs and never look anywhere else. Those are our people. We will ride their coattails and we will call ourselves successful. If that is the type of person that we are going to graduate and send out and say, and that is the successful church planter that we say, yes, this is what we need more of. Great. The end is nigh. Like it's all coming apart at the seams. So we have to, as part of this, all redefine what is it going to take. And what I hear you saying, Scott, is the success of future church plants is what I actually don't think is a change to new territory of valuing the every man and every woman who are going to grow in their theological education. But I almost look at it as the verse you already cited, kind of looking at that APEST model back in Ephesians chapter 4. It's a return to form, because I think we as the church in America have really raised up the idea of pastor and what does it look like to lead a church. And it has started to take a shape that doesn't really look like what Paul lined out. And I think helping our every man and every woman be trained to be thoroughly equipped for whatever work that God brings us to is actually a return to what God has called us to long ago, which gives me hope for the future, at least kind of.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think it's, there's not, you can't put one bullet in the gun, fire it and be like, hey, that was the right one, church planting. Yes, absolutely. Like, do we need more church plants? Completely agree. Everything that you just said in terms of equipping the saints to do the work of ministry, to be able to, reach out to your neighbors and to the people that you work with, to be able to say, I'm a Christian and I'd like to, explain to you why that's important, why that matters to me, why I think that matters to you. And then, of course, I would say addressing the issues that exist within the current church community is another big part of it. But so I think that 80,000 number could get modified if, for example, if it's a replacement value of churches that are failing, well, maybe part of what we should be doing is helping churches stop failing. And, I think that's part of what Knox is doing too. How do we, by equipping both pastors and the people in the congregation to do effective ministry, then they're able to support their pastor. I went on a kind of a week-long quiet retreat of sorts, just by myself. This was a couple of years ago, and had just stepped into the role of president, and was feeling a lot of the pressures and concerns and fears that you might. And I was about a year in, and so I was just doing a bunch of reading and praying and journaling. It was a great time. And one of the things that I came across was so interesting is I forget which of the polling companies it was. It was Pew or Gallup or whatever. But they did a survey, sometime around the mid 2010s, like 2015, 2016. And they did a survey of pastors, and they said, "Hey, pastors, what are your top 3 things that you wish were different about your church?" And within the top 2, the pastor said, "I wish my people would be more interested in learning about their faith. I wish that the congregation was more interested in being educated." I thought, well, that's really interesting. So I kept digging, and I found another poll, I think by the same company, and that went to the laity, to Christians, and said, what are some of the things you wish were different about your church experience? And coming in the top 3 was, I wish I had more opportunities to learn about my faith because I want to, and it's just not there. So I'm sitting there like, you got to be kidding me. You've got the pastor who says, I wish I had a more, engaged laity. And I just, I'm not seeing it. And then you go ask the lady, they're like, hey, we're engaged. We just wish we had more opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
And it's
trains passing in the night. You guys are missing each other. How's this happening?
What is going on? And so I think that that's where the work of Ephesiology, the work of the seminary generally, especially Knox, but seminaries more broadly, is, there's a chasm that can be filled, to where I think laity can feel a bit like, I got Sunday school, but I want more. But I may not want to jump into a seminary course. I use the analogy of a pool. It's kind of like maybe going from the shallow end to the deep end. And they're like, I don't know. That's a big ask. Are there opportunities for us, for you, to be able to do meaningful education for the laity, to equip and train them for their roles within the church, within their communities? That may not have to, you don't have to sit through my church history class and listen to me blather on about the Council of Nicaea for 3 hours, but we can still provide, a really solid education that will then both help with the church planners. If it's a 10% success rate, what if the laity were more strongly supportive and engaged, and the church planner didn't have to shoulder the burden of all the responsibility for success, but be able to have a team around him to be able to do that? I think that there's a lot of the numbers that we see can be resolved. Frankly, if I'm going to boil it down to a simple thing, is just being obedient. Like, why can't we be obedient to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength? There's a reason God put mind in there, is to learn about our faith, to love him, and then to love our neighbor as ourselves, if that's the order. And if we're called to love God, to embrace God, to know him, and then to love our neighbor, how best can we love our neighbor? It's by using all of that to be able to introduce our neighbors to that same loving relationship we have with God. I mean, it's, I'm oversimplifying it by saying let's just be obedient as though we're, like my 8 and 6-year-old kids. But I do think that there can be all of these obstacles that we put in the way of our own success simply because it's like, well, I'm not a pastor, or I'm really busy. I can't get involved in the church, or I'm not smart enough. Like, you should see my grades from undergrad. There's no way I would be able to succeed. And we do this sort of mental wall building that takes us out of the game.
But so, like you're saying, is that measure of success, that measure of worthiness, we have set up obstacles that the Lord hasn't set up. What he has asked from us is obedience. What he has asked from us is faithfulness. And we keep moving the goalposts. He hasn't. And we need to just continue to take those steps, whatever they may be, because the goal isn't cranking out 4.0 students, right? That's not the goal.
That's right. And success isn't ours either. I mean, it's not like if we go and do a church plant, all of a sudden it's like, hey, look what I did. It's just about faithfulness. And praise God, we've got lots of examples in Scripture where God's people are doing what we're doing, which is setting up reasons not to obey. I was reading just recently in the last couple of days, Jesus's conversations with his disciples in the garden before he's about to be crucified. I just need you to zero in and focus. This is important. And what do? They kept falling asleep. And Jesus doesn't come, drop the people's elbow on them and, just all of a sudden become angry at them. He's frustrated, but he sticks with them. He still uses them. They're still his apostles, and they still go on to be faithful in declaring and demonstrating the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I think for church planning, for ephesiology, yes, that's why Knox is excited to be able to partner with you and to be able to say, hey, this is important. And if you're going to go lead a church and start a church, then it is important to get educated. But then also for the church more broadly, I use the example of, if you could take a snapshot of a congregation, like an aerial shot, call it a 400-person congregation, and you got maybe 4 people up on the stage, maybe the pastor, assistant pastor, you got a worship guy, whatever. And you got 400 people in the pews. So much of what seminary is focused on is on the 4 people in the front. And that's still a priority for Knox, of course, absolutely. But I'm interested in the 400 people sitting there. And all I need is 1% of the people in the pews to be like, raise their hand and say, I'm interested in learning too. I want to be more educated in my faith. I want to, like the polls that I just mentioned, I want to be able to know my faith better and communicate it better. If I get 1% of that 400 group of people, I've doubled my impact in that church. Not my impact, but Knox's impact, the impact of a well-equipped, well-trained group of people who are interested in spreading their faith.
No, I like that, Scott, because I mean, you're getting at the core of the problem, or the issue, or the challenge, perhaps, or opportunity, even if we want to think in those ways, is that we want to see more of the church equipped. Not just I love that, not just focusing on the 4, but focusing on the 400. And so here's the question. How do we do that? Are you suggesting, and I'm leading you here because I know you're not suggesting this, are you suggesting that we want more of those 400 to come to us as a seminary, or is there something else?
So that's a great question. Part of the answer is, yeah, of course. I think that, when people, the number of people who don't feel called to ministry, professional, vocational ministry, but want to just learn more about their faith, and they're like, I just don't know. I think about my parents, and in this example, especially when I started at Knox, they're kind of, well, I won't give their age in case they're watching this, but they're my parents, and I'm 40, so figure it out mathematically. And they're like, I've been out of school for a while, like I'm smart, but I don't know. And the number of people that I've had conversations with like that at Knox, and I said, just give it one course. And if you don't like it, great, you can walk away. The number of people who reluctantly go into a course, having built those walls we were talking about earlier, I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be able to, fill in the blank. They get through a course and their response is, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get my certificate. And for some, after the certificate, they're like, I have to keep going. This is so good. I want to keep learning. That's not the majority of people. But the part of your answer is, yeah, that is what I want. Because I think that there's a lot more capacity intellectually, spiritually, missionally among God's people than is realized. But part of what you said that I think is key to the answer is reframing the question. I know you were trying to do this, and this is the way it typically gets asked, is, I think you said something along the lines of, do I want them to come to seminary? I said, the answer is no. That's not our job. Our job is not to pull from the church. Our job is to give to the church. And this is one of the big fundamental issues that I think is happening in theological education, is the relationship between seminaries and the church, and who is serving whom. If the role of the seminary is to serve the church, then why are we requiring people who go to seminary to leave their church context, to go into debt? The average seminary graduate is walking away with $33,000 worth of debt. That's on top of whatever they had for undergrad. Having left the church that they felt the call to ministry in the first place, ripping their families out of their context, their kids out of school, quitting their job, all so that they can get this degree and probably end up with some sort of pastoral position somewhere else where they're making less than they were when they first started this whole thing. And so, for me, I'm kind of asking the question, why? Like, that's not this. How is the seminary serving the church? The church is the one giving everything up in that scenario for the seminary. So for me, I would say, no, don't go to seminary. And there's, you have a great, line and some of the literature I've seen yourself, where it's, don't go to seminary. Matt's written a great article. Don't go to seminary. Why? That seems like such a weird thing for a seminary president to say. I would say the seminary's role is to go to the church. Michael, you and I both know of the book by Justo Gonzalez, The History of Theological Education, and it's a tremendous book for anyone interested in it. It's short, it tells a great story. It frames all of this out super well. It's Justo Gonzalez, an amazing guy. But one of the things that he'll say is, theological education has always historically been part of the church, and part of what will help solve some of the crises that theological education today is facing is to return to a church-centered model. And so I think, at Knox, that looks like partnering with churches, that we have church partners where we say, yes, we want to educate the people that are going to be, that you've identified to raise up to be pastors in your community. And we want to work with the pastor of that church in the mentoring of those students, because the reality is, I don't know what ministry looks like in Detroit. I don't know what ministry looks like in, lots of different places. I'm not the guy to equip someone for the ins and outs of what urban or rural or, different types of ministries look like. But the pastor of those churches certainly can be. And so I would say seminary needs to take itself a little bit less seriously and stop thinking, boy, we have all the answers. We have some of the answers, and we have a great opportunity to educate and equip. But if it's done outside of a meaningful relationship with the church and the students, all focused together on cultivating a person into a role where they've already been called. So flip everything I said earlier. Don't have the church give up the student. Don't have the student give up their home. Don't pull your kids out of school. Don't, have your, spouse have to quit their jobs so that you can move somewhere. Stay put. Why in the world are you leaving? If God's called you to ministry there, why are you leaving? And why is seminary asking you to do that? That's where I would say, no, yes, the responsibility and the opportunity rather is to educate people, both on the, for credit side with degrees and certificates, but also in doing education that reaches back into the church. Knox is doing this. We have opportunities to host a church history class with a group of people up in Findlay, Ohio, at a church up there. And here's a bunch of lady. I went up, I spoke, I gave a sermon, I talked about different things while I was up there. And we said, hey, let's do a church history class. And here's a group of people that are interested in learning more about their faith, more than 4 of the ones that I had identified earlier. And they're thrilled. They had a great time. And, it's us giving back to the church. Hey, here's some things to think about. Here are questions to challenge your pastor in a good way about how they can be more missionally effective. So that's how I would answer it. And I think that's what Ephesiology offers, a very similar kind of solution, which is not, hey, you should really stop what you're doing and then learn with us, and then maybe go back and, then you'll be ready to go. We'll give you a pat on the back, thumbs up, maybe a mug, that says alumnus of Ephesiology or Knox or Phoenix. Yes. I got my mug here. I didn't graduate from Knox, but I got a mug. And off you go now, best wishes. And, remember us at the end of your giving. I would say, no, it's let's be intentional. Let's be open-handed, and let's be re-engaged with the church in more meaningful ways. I think that's where people within the church may get excited about planning a church. Church may get excited about growing into a network of church plants, being a sending church. I think that's where education generally will fuel all of the things that are potential answers for the problems that you raised at the beginning.
Scott, you just said something, and I want to jump in because, Michael, I have to jump in because you're too excited. If I don't speak, then you'll just be so excited I won't get a chance, which is this. We've got to right size our expectations of what seminary is and what it brings to the table. And I think something that you hit on is understanding that what seminary is going to do, rather, what is it going to do and what is it not going to do? And one of the things is it's going to engage with you where you are, and it will help to provide tools. What it will not do is it will not provide context, and it will not provide gifts. The Holy Spirit has given us those gifts. And so if you expect to go to seminary and then have these gifts provided, as in all of a sudden the biggest clarity, and now I know how I can be unfurled on the world, that's from the Holy Spirit. He has already given you that, and he has already put you in a specific context. And so the seminary comes alongside of you, sees what the Holy Spirit is doing in you, and says, okay, this is great. Then let us just help provide you some tools. Let us help encourage you, pat on the back, slap on the butt, go get them. And then stay in that context, stay within the gift set that the Holy Spirit has given you. And then what is God doing? Like you said, maybe it is to change that definition of church planter. Maybe it is to participate locally and then see your church grow and impact other communities. This is what seminary or theological education at large can do. So, Michael, that was my super excited thing. What did I interrupt you from saying?
Well, nothing. I am so distracted by what you said. Unfurled on the world?
Unfurled on the world? What?
Sometimes I play around writing, and then it spills out of my face, so I can't stop it. So there we have it.
What I love about this conversation is that it actually addresses multiple paradigms that are in the process of being rethought and challenged, and I think in really healthy ways. One of which is the church. We've been talking about the church and the relationship with the seminary. That is a significant paradigm that has been under a lot of scrutiny and reconsideration. And Knox, I'm proud to say, and I'm not just saying this because I am an alum of Knox, but also that I work for Knox, but also because I really do see Knox has really challenged that paradigm a number of years ago. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm one of the early benefactors of that. And I'm one of those early students that said, listen, I'm looking for theological education. My church, I hit the ceiling of what my church can offer me. I want more. And I went and looking for a seminary. Now I was in the shadow of 3 major seminaries in Chicagoland: Trinity, Moody, and Wheaton. And then there are also plenty of others. And I did pass them all up because they were not incredibly affordable. and we were growing our family, and I wanted something that was flexible. And so I wanted to be able to do it from online, from at home. And not because I was lazy, not because I didn't want to, get rigorous education, but because that's what I needed. That's what I was looking for. And I got it. And I really enjoyed my experience and felt like I got a lot out of it. But it challenged some early paradigms. I remember sitting down with a dear friend of mine, who I still consider a dear friend of mine, who is of much older and more life experience than I am. And he sat me down and he goes, "That's really nice about your education. You should really go to a reputable seminary." And if you really want people to take you seriously, you should really go to a reputable seminary. Meaning go sit in a classroom, go uproot your family, all the things we talked about, and I think that there's a shifting paradigm of how we learn, and what used to be standard is no longer standard. And part of that is a generation that's emerging that says we're not going to do things the way our elders did it. The other side of it is we're not really sure if actually that formula is working anymore. And I think the evidence, as we've already discussed, it's not. It's failing. It's not working any longer. And we could point all the fingers we want, but when the reality is the paradigm is shifting, and as a seminary and as theological education goes, we need to be rethinking that paradigm. The other paradigm that's being thought is, in fact, higher education. Higher education is under a lot of scrutiny, and it actually, for multiple reasons, and probably some good ones, is that it has become this profitable institution in which people grow away. They leave high school and they pick up and they move out of the house and they go someplace, sometimes within state, sometimes out of state, to go get this other education in which to get a degree in which is hopefully going to give them a job that's going to make them wealthy and successful in the world and fulfill this thing we used to call the American dream. And so that whole system is collapsing in on itself. And a seminary is kind of caught up on the second tier level of that. And so that, as well as a paradigm that's now being rethought and at a different level as well too. And I'm not anti-education. I am we had this conversation last week. Education is the pathway to much success. And the data still says, if you go get a college education, you're more likely to have a more stable job and generate more income and wealth for your family and the future generation to follow. And so education's key. It's necessary. It's needed. Scotty, you said this, that if the church is educated, that will bring about the success metrics that the church has been longing for and looking for. And so I think we have to be thinking about what is our end game, and then how do we change even our paradigm? So that's why I love this conversation, is because it's challenging the existing paradigms and then looking at what's working, what isn't working, and how do we find solutions that are almost future-proofing these institutions and doing it in healthy, successful ways. And so I think, I'm proud of what Knox is doing. I'm proud of what Ephesiology is doing, because this is what we're all trying to do, is solve some of the same problems and collaborating together on that in a really global centric approach that says no one tribe is going to have the market on this. We are going to have to do this together.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's so key, the collaborative nature of what we're talking about. If we're not able to collaborate, the end, Andrew, as you said, I think is nigh. Here's I'm going to ask an uncomfortable question and just throw it open to all of y'all. I've heard, and I'm sure you have as well, something to the effect that, well, my pastor has gone to seminary, and so why do I need to go to seminary if I can just learn from him what he learned at seminary? How do you speak into that? How do you wrestle with that? Because, and this is why I ask that question, because in my experience, I mean, I've trained pastors. I have a lot of pastor friends that love those guys, but I often find myself thinking that, yes, Sunday morning is important. It's good. We're encouraged by God's word, but there's a depth there that the pastor can't really get to and really capitalizing on the seminary education that he's had.
Look, I'm the lone pastor on the call right now, so I'm going to be quiet for a second. Looking forward, Matt and Scott, answer here, but I don't mind coming off the top rope in a second.
I think Scotty, what you should speak into this. I think you might have. Well, I'd just be interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so practically, how much time does that person who says, "Why can't I just learn from my pastor, who did go to seminary, and then I can just get the sort of benefits that flow through him to me based on that"? How much time in a given week does that person get with the pastor? How much opportunity does the pastor get to shape and mold and teach? I think that that's part of it. I don't think that's a bad question. And I don't want to burden someone with, that's not enough, but I think that there's the opportunity to receive and give in ways that don't have to rely solely on the pastor. I think that we can receive certainly just through the study of scripture, which hopefully will then raise questions, which will then lead to a search for answers that will, maybe it's seminary, maybe it's ephesiology, maybe it's one of the parachurch ministries that actually has decent material and is able to answer some of those. Maybe it's reading books. I'm not saying you have to go to seminary. But I am saying that it's the situation you described is kind of a one-way relationship from the pastor to the people. And while that's primarily the role of the shepherd is to care for the people, the church functions as a body with blood flowing to and from its different members, working together with Christ as its head. And the pastors play a big role in that, but so do the rest of the people of Christ. And so I think that there's a responsibility there. And there is, as Ephesians 4 tells us, the responsibility of the pastors, teachers, prophets, and evangelists and others to equip the saints. Yes, that is true. That is a burden that the pastor bears uniquely, but perhaps not solely. And so that's where I would say there are resources. That's where a seminary like Knox could say, let us come alongside you. Let us fill that gap that we identified earlier between the people who want to learn and the pastors who wish that they had an engaged laity. I think that there are opportunities for education that seminaries could be a great answer for. It may not be the only one. I'm not here to just be like, seminary solves all the world's problems. That's not true. We all know that's not true. But if we're going to serve the church meaningfully, then I think that that's one real vehicle by which a seminary could help the pastor and the laity by occupying some of that middle space.
I would also just follow that up too, and my statement probably won't be as as positive as Scott has put it, but it's along the same lines, and that is, I think when we talk about the conversations today about people kind of having news information silos, and people kind of sourcing their information from a single stream, feedback loops, things like that. When we start looking at that, I realized that what seminary offered me was diversity of thought, and how helpful and freeing that was for me. And I realized that my pastor, a good man with a good heart who wants what's best, became the single source of information as it pertained to my faith and pertained to how I interact with the world. And while this person read and studied and learned, was the disseminating source of this information. And this person, along with his board of other like-minded men, decided the types of content that we would study as in Bible studies and Sunday school classes and whatever else that we would do. And they were the gatekeepers of that information. And I realized this became more apparent to me as I began seminary, because initially you start off with the easy stuff, It's the stuff that everybody else kind of agrees on, the orthodox stuff. It's then when you start advancing and getting challenged by some of the other presuppositional thoughts within evangelicalism and start getting exposed to, hey, these are the other traditions within evangelicalism in a really healthy, constructive way, might I add. You kind of bring that back and you start kind of having these conversations with your own pastor and your own leadership, and suddenly you're the unsafe one in the room. And suddenly you're the one who's a bit unbound and unhinged. And you're like, actually, I'm just looking at the spectrum of Christianity, and suddenly that becomes scary for those who are in power. And I think that there is an aversion to seminary because of those reasons. And I actually think that's wrong. I think it's misguided. And for the individual who says, well, I'll just learn what my pastor is teaching me, I would say, you're missing out. You're missing out on so much more within the spectrum of Christianity. And just because your pastor said, go read this book from this other author, doesn't mean that person's giving you a full spectrum of what is out there and what's beautiful and good within the context of all that is of Christianity and this great tradition that spans 2,000 years. And seminary, while still limited in scope at times, I think still offers the plurality of giftings and the plurality of expression and diversity of thought. And Scotty, as you mentioned, I mean, you've got the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds and teachers that all come together and bringing their gifts together to create something beautiful. And so I think that's the wonderful gift that seminary can offer, that I think pastors and leaders need to release themselves from, and need to say, we need to be sending our people. So Andrew, as the token pastor, as I just threw you under the bus.
Oh, I don't feel those tire treads. So I think to jump on an agreement with everything is said, or rather, so now different perspective. One thing is, I know that not everybody listening is a pastor, so many are, but for those who are not, let me just frankly say it is kind of a numbers game, and I want to invite you to the numbers game. So your sermon on Sunday is 30 minutes or less. And so average time a pastor spends on creating that sermon, if somebody is wanting to spend that, could be like a full day. So 8 hours, right? 8 hours worth of study and material boiled down to, you got 30 minutes. So 8 hours of prep boiled down into 30 minutes of presentation. Let's just quite simply say a lot hit the cutting room floor, right? You didn't get everything. So if you say, as long as I just get what my pastor gives me, I will get what he has. You have no idea the number of things that we don't unfurl on you because it would be ridiculous and you would be bored. Also, just because it interests me doesn't mean it's going to interest you. The number of rabbit trails that I go down during sermon prep time doesn't make it to my Sunday sermon, because frankly, it doesn't make for really great presentation material.
I would argue is actually incredibly helpful and insightful.
Well,
for the congregant. Yeah.
Trust me, they all hear the nerdy stuff from me, right? So I'm not saying that I don't bring that boredom to the forefront, but I do, and that often. But okay, so that's one aspect that you can't get it all in a small presentation on a Sunday morning. And to Matt's point, right? You get that for what, 30 minutes or less? How many hours during the week are you taking in information? That is such a small source. You can't get it all from that. Secondly, it just hit me when both you, Scott, and Matt were talking. What makes you think that your pastors are finished products? What makes you think that they are not still taking in more information, that they are still being formed, that they are still learning? If they've gone to seminary, they didn't quit learning when they got their commemorative graduation mug. Like, they are continuing to take in sources. I was looking behind me, or rather in my little video shot here, and I'm laughing. It seems that I have probably taken in more Anglican authors and sources in the past year than I have look, I'm at a Southern Baptist church and I'm reading a whole bunch of Anglican authors. At some point, I am probably going to run across something that I might disagree with them on, but there is a richness in their wisdom that, when I say I don't get it through SBC authors, please, that's not a slight. I am saying there is a different aspect of their faith tradition and their understanding of our common Savior that I thoroughly appreciate and I need to hear. And if I, as a pastor, need to continue to be shaped by different voices, different traditions, all running at Christ, what makes you as Joe congregant or Jill congregant think that you don't need that either? Like you do. And so please go and get that. Be educated and broaden that input source so that you can be formed more fully into the image of Christ.
That's a good word, Andrew, and really appreciate that as well. And Michael, I think we're going to kind of wrap this conversation up here, but talk a little bit about the partnership that has just kind of started here between Ephesiology and Knox.
Well, it's something that I'm very excited about because we so often talk about how important it is for us to collaborate. And grateful for Scott and his collaboration as we thought through, where is the intersection of what Ephesiology is doing and what Knox is doing, and how might we capitalize on that and help to be a part of the solution to equipping more church planters. And so Ephesiology developed a certificate in church planting, 5 courses, 15 hours. In that certificate program that are focusing on the movemental ecclesiology, movement leadership, the study of the church in Ephesus. And there are 2 other classes that I don't remember what they are. Identity-based discipleship and maybe theology of evangelism, taught by some of the greatest people in the world. Randy Newman, I teach, of course. Andrew's involved in that. As well as others. And so we're grateful to partner with Knox on that certificate. And that certificate, for those who would like to transfer into a degree program, if, of course, you're accepted into Knox Theological Seminary, you can bring those credits along into their MDiv as well as the MA. You guys are going to have to remind me what that one is, because it has the Master of Arts, Biblical and Theological Studies. Did I get that? So we're excited about the working in partnership.
Yeah, I would just echo that too. I used the example earlier of I don't know what ministry looks like in Detroit, but someone who has specialty knowledge in that world. Would be someone that Knox would say, we need you to help in the formation of these students for that purpose. And Knox doesn't have a church planning, faculty here, a professor or department of church planting. And so when the opportunity came up and in conversation with you, Michael, and Matt, of course, along the way, to be able to say, this is an area of specialty for you. You have all the tools to be able to equip people in an area that, certainly someone who leaves Knox will be well equipped theologically and practically to enter into a church planting type role, but not in a way that is focused and as cultivated as what they would get with, this program with Ephesiology, the certificate. So we're grateful to be able to say, like I said earlier, let's be, I hope seminaries become more open-handed. You have to do it in a way that, it's reasonable. You still tick all the right boxes. We've worked on that. So, accreditation-wise and other matters too, it's all been sorted out. But let's let you be really good at what you're really good at, and then give opportunities for students who want to take that knowledge and bring it into the traditional seminary course of study. We're really good at that, and I think that the combination of the two is pretty powerful.
Scott, thanks again for joining us. Just again, for our listeners, we've been talking with Dr. Scott Maynor, the president of Knox Theological Seminary. It's based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but you can learn more about the programs at knoxseminary.edu. And grateful for you, my friend, and joining us on this podcast, and of course for Andrew and Michael as well too. Love you guys, and to our audience, thank you for doing theology in community with us here on the Ephesiology Podcast. For Michael, Andrew, Scott, and myself, we'll catch you next time on the podcast.